Yo, what is going on, guys? Jack here, and welcome to episode 9 of our series here on Football Manager 2015, Ruining Manchester City. Hopefully you guys are good. Today we are in the year 2030. We are now way into the future from, I guess, where we initially started back in the year 2014, and now we have to take a look at what's been going on. So last time we left off, Manchester City had now kind of slowly established themselves as a Premier League team, but still had an underlying issue in the fact they were failing FFP. Since then, it's been a little bit bizarre, really. So if we look here at their overall performances in the league, we left off in 2025 last episode. Since then they've finished 6th 5 years ago. 4 years ago they finished 12th. They then finished rock bottom of the Premier League and got relegated from seemingly nowhere. We'll have I guess a look into that and see if we can work out what went wrong there, but they did immediately get promoted back, and then in the most recent year, they actually finished 6th, qualifying for the Europa League. So I guess the first thing to do is just have a look at the landmarks. Actually, worth noting that Kenny Pavey is now in charge, so they have had a managerial change. If you look at the manager changes here, Pavey just came in, and he came in a year and a half ago. So they've had two long-serving managers in Rosler and Julian, but since then, Pavey's had to come in. He's going to pick up the slack and hopefully do some jobs for them. You can see here he is responsible for their championship win. If we look at the landmarks here, they continued to fail financial fair play for a number of years, and as I kind of mentioned, I think last episode, it was a case of they had failed it for the year that we were covering, so that's not that great. But rather oddly, you can see here they won the Europa League, Manchester City, in 2027, but then they failed FFP, and then the following year they were relegated, but they did win the European Super Cup too. So I guess the first thing to do would be to take a look at that European Cup winning season. Let's see how they actually got on. So looking at it here, they had a testimonial for Zuccolini, which is kind of cool. Of course, he's been at the club for a number of years. He's actually left more recently on a free to go down to League One, but cool to see him get a testimonial. But you can see here, looking at it, playing in the Europa League. How did they get on in Group E? Is there a way we can see for the previous years? I'm not even sure if there is, if I'm honest. I think it gets rid of the league history and stuff. But you can see here, won the league, or at least came quite high up in the league, did quite well. Then knocked out Ajax, knocked out Leeds in the Europa League. Then knocked out Benfica. In the semi-final, they were matched up against Roma, who they beat 3-1 on aggregate. And in the final, they beat Inter Milan 3-1 in a very tight game. So kind of odd to see that. But I guess kind of cool in the same way that they won that, and that would also mean that the following year, the year they got relegated, they were in the Champions League. Now looking at it here, they finished rock bottom of their group from what I can see. It looks like they maybe won one game or 2 games and drew 2, but they finished bottom of their group, which meant they didn't even go into the Europa League. And looking at it here, just something must have gone wrong is all that can really be said. Lots of defeats, lots of losses, and they ended up getting relegated in that year. So I guess we'll take a look at that year and try and see if we can work out what happened. So they actually finished rock bottom here on 35 points. Really poor, just seemingly unable to win. A lot of their wins were by 1 or 2 goals, drew 11 games. Only lost half their games, which I say only very loosely. But it was a very high scoring points total actually in the Premier League. I think generally the rule of thumb that people say is if you win and get 39 or 38 points, that is usually enough to stay up. Wasn't this season. A team in Middlesbrough getting relegated on 41 points. It was really close at the bottom too. But before that, Manchester City did finish 12th. So they were slipping away there. They were slowly on this weird kind of decline, and that kind of continued through. So let's have a little bit more of a look at the landmarks. They won the Super Cup, got promoted as champions, and that's kind of where things have left off really. Since then, the last 2 years, they've just been a kind of steady team in the league. Obviously, this is their first year in the Premier League, and they've qualified for the Europa League again. Should be interesting to see how that squad cope with juggling those extra set of fixtures. If we look at their players here, Aldo Mele becoming their leading man, it seems, getting lots of goals for them. Because we're so far in the future at this point, most of the players in this squad are just regens, so you know, there's not too much of kind of massive interest here. If we look at some of the older players, there might be 1 or 2 real players In fact, it doesn't even look like that's the case, if I'm honest. So they have their team of regens here. If we look at their most valuable player, it is Mele. Behind him, they've got this guy, Victor Alberto Alvarez. He looks quite good at centre-back. Let's have a look at the financial situation going on here. So they have a balance of 262 million. Their transfer budget for this coming year is set at 66 million, and their wage budget's at 4 million. Still no sugar daddy. They've still not changed who's in charge since they were in League One. I guess we'll have a quick look at the transfers because we're so far in the future, and a lot of these are regens at this point. Unfortunately, there's not too much that can be read into this other than how much they spent. So looking at it here, in the 2025-26 season, they spent £140 million on players. Following that, 99 million spent the next year. Blimey, they spent so much money. The next year, I can only assume this is the year they got relegated. Alan Granger going out on a free, their star Scottish man who they spent a lot of money on. Looks like he really declined as a player after they bought him in for a lot of money in the Championship. Didn't really perform for a £19 million player. Ended up at Motherwell. So that's not great for him. But you can see here, they just kind of collapsed, you'd have to say. 2027... 28, let's just check. Was that the year they got relegated? That was actually the year they went down, as opposed to the year they were actually in the in fact no, that would have been the year they went, no, in fact this would have been the year that they got relegated. I'm actually going to do something really quick here. I'm going to add myself as a manager at Manchester City, just because I want to look at their financial graph. I'm curious to see how it looked. I've not done this at any other point in the series, but I feel like a graph would be useful here to try and work out if that was responsible for them perhaps going down. So actually looking at the money here, you can see that it almost certainly was a factor. You can see here the money really declining, and they've certainly had lots of little spikes of investment. If we look at the income, how much money are the board having to put in here? So it's looking like they're making a lot of money in sponsorships. This year they only made 12 million in sponsorships, but last year they made 249 million in sponsorships. I can only assume, and I might be wrong here, but the game actually replicates what some clubs do in real life, which is, due to financial fair play, you're only allowed to invest a certain amount of money into your club as the chairman, and it's kind of capped at a certain amount. But what some chairmen do is they set up a sponsorship with their club where they'll give them money out of their own bank balance, but on behalf of a company or business that they run outside of football. I can only assume that's what's being done here, and that's why they're getting so much money in sponsorship, because that should not be that high, and that would kind of make sense. So kind of interesting to see that. If we look elsewhere at the squad, I guess we can have a little look at a few other bits and bobs here. What kind of expectations of the board giving the managers? Let's have a look, because that's going to be something interesting. Oh, of course, the fight bravely against relegation in the Championship. I think we've broken the game, ladies and gentlemen, because the game is very confused. It thinks that they're still in the Championship, which they're most certainly not. Interesting. Well, anyway, I'm going to wrap up this episode here, guys. Some kind of interesting stuff, I guess, going on behind the scenes. We're getting so far into the future now that the players are no longer a massive part of kind of seeing what's going on. Obviously, monitoring how much money's being spent and stuff like that's worth keeping a track and keeping an eye on. But really, it's more so about how the club's coping, about the landmarks that they're reaching, that kind of stuff. So anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please do smash the like button. It is greatly appreciated. If you've got any comments about this series, leave them down in the comments. If we could hit 750 likes, that would be incredible. Next episode will be another 5 years into the future. We'll have a bit of a look and maybe weigh up what we're going to do next with this series, because the further we get into the future, the less relevant things become. Hopefully I'll see you guys on episode 10. And other than that, it is me, Jack, and I'll talk to you guys in a bit. I'm out.